Hey folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier and doing a little something different tonight. I watched UFC 1, the beginning. That would be the first pay-per-view from the Ultimate Fighting Championship back on November 12th, 1993 from the McKnowles Sports Arena, Denver, Colorado. 7,800 people were there, which means 7,800 people were in attendance for this thing, and it had a buy rate of 86,000 buys across the country. I'm not sure what the exact price was, probably $14.95 or $19.95 back then, I would guess. Um, why did I decide to watch this? Well, I got the Ultimate Fighting Championship UFC Fight Pass. It's $50 for the year. I figured, why not start from the very beginning? I have watched this event in the past. I did not see it live, but I have watched, believe it or not, a VHS copy of this thing, and I remembered a little bit of it. It's fun, you can see kind of the origin story, as it were. I mean, this is before the Fatitas. This is before this new merger with WWE. TKO, I believe it's going to be called. Dana White wasn't around for this. Joe Rogan wasn't around for this. Mike Goldberg, the commentator, Big Bill McCarthy, just a bunch of different people, because this is, an origin story. Probably the people that really got this thing going was the Gracie family. Royce Gracie, of course, is entered into the tournament. His father is actually given a nice plaque before the finals of the tournament. Crowd was a little unruly, a lot of boos during that ceremony, which was kind of disrespectful. Um, the reason why they had this event in Colorado apparently was because there was no sports commission at the time in Colorado, so the UFC could kind of do whatever they wanted to do. Should be noted, John Milius, a Hollywood veteran, had directed Conan the Barbarian. He decided, or he came up with the Octagon itself, which has been a big selling point for the UFC since 1993, is the actual Octagon. Now, as far as this, watching this stuff now, you have to grade it on a curve, obviously, because this was a long time ago, and this is literally a sport that is, starting from scratch. I felt a little. I felt like the fighters did their part, the crowd did their part. I feel like the production team was a little bit lacking. And once again, you got to grade it on a curve because it's so long ago, and also because this was brand new. That being said, however, Bill Wallace as the lead commentary guy. Now, I just looked him up. Bill Wallace had a very impressive kickboxing career. He actually lives not too far from me. Maybe I'll go see if I can introduce myself. But Bill did not seem to be the most experienced of commentators. He actually starts the show with a bit of a misspeaking moment. He says the Ultimate Fighting Challenge instead of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is just an error, human mistake. But still, the first time that you hear the Ultimate Fighting Championship on a UFC show, you would like it to be the Ultimate Fighting Championship, not the Ultimate Fighting Challenge. Reminds one of when Hogan said the New World Organization during the June of '96 NWO speech. So Bill Wallace was to me struggling a little bit, even in his first couple of sentences. I think he might have belched, or he might have had a hiccup. Because he excuses himself afterwards. So I mean, Bill was having a bit of a rough night. Jim Brown, the legendary football player, is actually with him. Jim, is a well-known football player. He starts off the show listing off a bunch of tough guys that he's known from the football days. Of course, this event has got nothing to do with football, but that's what Jim knew. Jim did lead some, credibility to this night, because he was very well known. Kathy Long, who I didn't really know, she was actually the third commentator. So props to UFC for having an intergender, commentary team, kind of ahead of its time. And Kathy was okay. I mean, she apparently was a kick fighter herself, or a kickboxer, and she did have some insights. But they didn't go to her a lot. There was actually a couple of guys that I thought no offense to Bill, but a couple of guys that were a little smoother on commentary. A guy named Rod Machado, I think, comes in about halfway through and then adds some commentary to a couple of fights. Maybe somebody sent him out there to help out Bill. He was pretty good. And another guy who did post-fight interviews, Brian Kilmeade, was also pretty good. The ring announcer is listed as Rich Goins. I had some issues with Rich. I'm glad that they ended up with Bruce Buffer. He's been doing a great job. He's a little over the top for my taste, but Buffer is very good for UFC. Rich Goins this night had a really bad habit of kind of ending his sentences by looking down at his cards. So if he was saying, "Welcome to the Ultimate Fighting Championship," he looked like this. He said, "Welcome to the Ultimate Fighting Championship." Every time he would end a sentence, he would look down at his card. Even when he was introducing guys, it kind of looked like I don't think he meant to do this, but it felt like he was kind of embarrassed or ashamed. I mean, that's just the misread of body language. I'm sure he was just maybe nervous and just didn't have these things memorized. He didn't want to get anybody's names wrong. So he's looking at his cards. And I've done ring announcing. I know that it's tough. You don't want to mispronounce anything. But at the same time, he just wasn't very smooth. Oh, boy. Some things, some of the stuff about Bill's commentary, I think he kept emphasizing the no holds barred, and but there really was some holds barred. I mean, they did not allow eye gouging. They had a few rules. I think no low blows and no fish hooking, meaning the thumb in the mouth. So there was actual rules. So for him to keep saying there are no rules wasn't exactly accurate, even for the first UFC. The tournament was pretty simple. It was, the rules: no biting, no eye gouging, and no groin shots. So, I mean, that's 3 rules right there. There was also supposed to be no referee stoppages, but that did happen in the very first fight. The very first fight, you may have seen this. They played a lot on, flashback shows, was Gerard Goudou, who was an expert in Savate, if I'm saying that right, against Atilia Tuli, sumo fighter. You've probably seen this fight if you've ever watched a UFC retrospective. Atilia was about 425 pounds, they said. That probably was legit. He was a big dude, looked very intimidating, and he comes charging to this Gerard Goudou guy, who I believe is a Frenchman. And, Gerard kind of slaps him on the head a few times. Telia stumbles, drops to the ground, gets caught in a really awkward angle against the cage, kind of hesitates before he tries to get up, and Gerard takes that moment to give him a really brutal kick to the face. It looked like he busted open Telia's mouth and maybe chipped a tooth or knocked a tooth right out of his mouth. And also it looked like a significant damage to one of the eyes, I think the left eye of Telia. So it was pretty brutal, pretty nasty. And the referee actually hops in, and, the referee's not sure what to do because he's probably been told, hey, you're not supposed to stop these fights. Let the corner stop the fight or let the fighter tap out or submit or whatever. But he's really concerned for the fighter's health, good for him. And the corner comes over and they consult. And the next thing you know, the very first UFC fight is over in 26 seconds. And, the crowd has kind of a mixed reaction because they have seen some brutality. I mean, they did see blood. They did see somebody get hurt. I'm not laughing at them. I'm just kind of laughing at the situation because it must have been awkward. But it was not a fight to the death, but it was a first blood type of encounter or a first injury, missing tooth. I mean, come on, people. So 26 seconds, the Frenchman continues. The next fight, this is just a straight out 8-man tournament. Now, the way that this 8-man tournament was set up, the 2 best fighters in this thing, Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock, actually could potentially meet in the semifinals. But let's continue with this first half of the tournament. There was also actually a alternate bout that was not on the show as far as the videotape or the tape history. I don't know if it was ever recorded. I mean, that would actually be the first ever UFC fight between Jason DeLucia defeating Trent Jenkins with a rear naked choke in 52 seconds. That was the alternate bout. Too bad that wasn't broadcast because that would have been interesting. I don't know if they've ever taped that, if that's some type of archive footage somebody has somewhere, but I'm wondering if that's on the UFC Fight Pass somewhere. DeLucia against Trent Jenkins, just for historical reasonings. But basically, beyond that, Gerard Gordeau and Telia Tuli is, by all accounts, the first UFC fight, at least that we have recorded. Kevin Rosier, kickboxing, a big dude, kind of a big, lovable guy. He was actually pretty good with speaking. Takes on Zane Frazier in Kenpo. I believe this is actually the longest fight of the night. I'm looking over here at my notes in case you're wondering. But 4 minutes and 20 seconds. These guys actually had a really decent fight. And towards the end of this fight, you see a countdown clock. Apparently, there was 5-minute rounds. They were going to have 5-minute rounds, indefinite amounts of 5-minute rounds with a 1-minute break in between each round. I didn't remember that. I remembered it just being, no rounds at all, just keep on going. But apparently there was 5-minute rounds for the very first UFC, although it didn't really come into play. But there was a countdown clock going on. But Kevin Rosier was able to beat the countdown clock. This is the first fight that we really see, what's going to become UFC, in my opinion. The first fight, the 26 seconds, you couldn't really tell much. But with the kicking of the leg strikes and the mixing of the boxing and the grappling and even the stall tactics and guys getting tired, Frazier and Rosier actually had a really pretty decent fight. So, hats off to them. I mean, this was a sport in progress, and I think a lot of guys were probably tentative. They didn't have the very best athletes in the world, with the exception of Royce and Ken, and maybe Gerard. I mean, they had who they had, but I give all these 10 guys, really, the 8 fighters and the 2 alternates, you got to give them credit. I mean, they're part of history, so good for them. The next fight is where things start to pick up a bit. Royce Gracie taking on Art Jimerson. If you ever seen clips of this, you see Jimerson is wearing kind of a bad choice. He's got one glove on and one glove off, boxing glove. So it's really kind of a goofy setup for him. I think there was a thing on Vice or Spike TV years ago, a video, a documentary about this evening, the first UFC. I think it was on Vice, and they talk about this whole crazy night. And, that one boxing thing was something they spoke on. So Royce Gracie able to get a very weird looking submission. He's kind of smothering the guy. He's kind of about to do some stuff to Art, but it looks like he's really not choking him from the camera angle that we see. But then we go to another camera angle after Art taps out 5 times before the referee sees it. The referees are a work in progress in this too. They're missing a lot of stuff, but Art taps out. Royce gets the victory in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. The next fight and the final fight of the first round is Ken Shamrock, who's listed as a shoot fighter. He actually had done, I believe it's called Pancrase over in Japan, and he had actually done some pro wrestling. A lot of people don't know that, and had a fight with the Nasty Boys, of all people. But he's taken on Patrick Smith, who's a Taekwondo guy. And Patrick Smith is actually billed from Denver, Colorado. So he's the hometown guy. The fans are really behind Patrick Smith. He looks great, but once they get into grappling, they kind of have this interesting thing where both guys has the other guy's ankle hooked on the mat, but Ken was just superior with the ankle lock and able to get a really nasty ankle lock slapped onto Patrick, and Patrick had no choice but to tap. He's going to lose his ankle if he doesn't tap, so he does. But I'm sure that had to be tough for him because he's in his hometown. He probably knew a lot of people there. In his mind, he probably thought he was going to win this whole thing. But he gets tapped out, and the fans are booing. An interesting thing with this show is they start interviewing some of the people that lose the fights. That starts next with our next fight, Gerard Gordeau against Kevin Rosier. So this is the semifinals. Once again, it's an 8-man tournament, single elimination Gerard Gordeau, the Frenchman who had won the first fight over the sumo fighter, taking on Kevin Rosier, who won probably the most competitive fight of the whole night. But basically, they go at it pretty competitive, but it's short. It's 59 seconds, and Gerard gets a TKO. And after the fight, they interview Kevin Rosier, who's lost, and he's just a big guy. He's telling us how tough it is to compete in Denver with the air. The air quality is really tough up there. That's the Mile High City. We've heard about that with football teams playing the Broncos and so forth. And so Kevin is basically very honest, and he says he's just, he's overweight, and he's done his best to lose. He says he lost 40 pounds in a couple of weeks or something, which might be a tall tale a bit, but he's a pretty cool guy. He's got a lot of charisma. I think they probably wanted to keep this guy around just because he kind of was like the Fred Flintstone, the everyman of this thing. But yeah, he got beat by Gerard, and he wishes Gerard luck. And these two guys actually shook hands before the fight. I don't know if they were friends going into this tournament, but maybe they were friends coming out of it. But Gerard Gordeau moves on. Unfortunately, either in this fight or the one before it, or a combination of both, he's actually broken some bones in his hand, but he continues to fight on. So good for him. Then we have they're really building this thing up. This Royce Gracie-Ken Shamrock fight. It was supposed to be the best fight of the night. It was good for a few seconds, but it only went 57 seconds. I mean, one of the shorter fights of the night. It looks like the second shortest of the actual tournament, and the alternate bout was 52 seconds. So depending on how you look at it, the second shortest fight of the night, or the third shortest fight of the night. But Shamrock submits to a choke to Royce in only 57 seconds. And actually, I remember this now. Royce kind of had like a triangle, not a triangle, but like a diagonal type of choke on him. There you go. I mean, interesting. Of course, these guys would fight again, and I'll get into that if I do more of these reviews. But Royce Gracie now, his first fight was 2 minutes and 18 seconds. His second fight is 57 seconds. Basically 3 minutes of activity. He's going up against Gerard in the final. Gerard's actually had shorter time, but more damage. Gerard's only fought for less than a minute and a half between his two fights. But Gerard has more damage because of that hand. So now we finally get to Gerard Gordeau versus Royce Gracie in the finals. I'm really interested in whatever happened to Gerard Gordeau, whatever happened to this guy. Before we get to the finals, we have that ceremony. Pretty interesting stuff. You see the whole bevy of brothers, from the Royce Gracie's older brothers. Apparently, the story that they always tell is that Royce was actually the least accomplished of the Gracie brothers, and they wanted to put him in there to prove that even our, kid brother can win this thing. And but his older brother, I think, was a promoter and also a well-known fighter. Good-looking guy, too. Nice mustache on him. They're giving this award to their father, Helio. The crowd's booing, which is kind of disrespectful. But I thought it was fun. And then we move on to the finals, Gerard Gordeau and Royce Gracie. And Royce, after a minute and 40 seconds, gets another submission victory. So if you do watch this thing, it's on. You just have to look on your UFC Fight Pass. It's probably other places too. Have a little sip of water here. For me, it was fun to watch this. Like I said, I've seen this before, but it's been at least 10 years since I watched this thing. I am going to watch UFC 2. I want to start that. I don't know if I'll get through the whole thing tonight. But if you folks find these videos somehow, this is one pro wrestling fan. I'll probably I do have other things on my channel here. I have my own films. I also have just recently split up my channel, and I've added one Mike Messier YouTube channel, which has my Mike's Instant Movie Reviews and my straight-to-camera rants about other things besides, combat sports, pro wrestling, and so forth. And then one man in a camera films, which has my my own films. So that's it. If you enjoyed yourself, this is a work in progress, kind of like the first UFC. This is the first one of these I've done as far as UFC analysis. But if you like them, leave a comment. If you don't, leave a comment. I can take the heat. I can take the critique. And if you want to buy my books, go to the upper right or the upper left and go to my website, MikeMessier.com. You can see that over here. And thanks a lot. Any other topics you want me to cover, let me know. Have a nice day or night.